Welcome to Once Upon English.
In a city of stone walls and whispered feuds, two hearts beat against the tide of destiny. Verona, ancient and restless, was divided by a hatred so old that no one could remember its true cause. Two noble families, the Montagues and the Capulets, walked the same streets yet burned with a rivalry that poisoned the air. Markets bustled, church bells rang, the sun warmed the terracotta rooftops, but beneath the surface, tension waited like a blade in the dark. Amid this storm of pride and vengeance, fate wove a fragile thread of love, one that would shine brighter than all the hatred around it, even if it burned too quickly. Romeo, a Montague, was a dreamer who believed in beauty more than blood. Juliet, a Capulet, was a young girl on the cusp of womanhood, brave enough to defy the world for the voice of her heart. Their love would bloom like a rose among thorns, delicate, dazzling, and doomed. This is not just a story of love. It is the story of longing so fierce it defies reason, of choices that echo across centuries. It is about how love can rise even where it is forbidden, and how sometimes the brightest flames leave the deepest shadows. As we begin this journey, imagine walking through the narrow streets of Verona at twilight. You hear laughter, the sound of swords clashing in distant alleys, and above it all, a quiet promise, a promise that two souls will meet, and nothing will ever be the same again. Verona, bathed in the golden light of a late afternoon, seemed peaceful to the casual eye. The cobbled streets were alive with merchants shouting prices for their spices and fabrics, while children ran past fountains carved with ancient lions. Yet beneath this warm, sunlit scene, the tension between the Montagues and Capulets simmered like water on the edge of boiling. At the marketplace, two Capulet servants, Samson and Gregory, lingered near the stalls. They carried swords at their sides, not for decoration, but for the ever-present threat of a Montague crossing their path. Their voices were low but filled with bitterness. "Did you see the Montague boys strutting down the street this morning?" Samson muttered, his hand twitching near his sword's hilt. "One day, we'll put them in their place." Gregory smirked, his eyes narrowing. "We only need a reason. They think they own Verona, but we'll show them who rules these streets." Not far away, two young Montague servants spotted the pair. The mere sight of Capulets, dressed in their family colors, was enough to ignite trouble. A careless word turned into a shove into drawn blades. In moments, the peaceful market erupted into chaos. Swords clashed, merchants shouted, and terrified passers-by fled. The fight grew as more Montague and Capulet men arrived. Sparks flew from steel, the sound ringing against the walls of shops and houses. But this was not new to Verona. This was an old pattern, repeated for generations, as natural and as destructive as a summer storm. Then, above the clash, a commanding voice roared, "Stop this madness!" Prince Aeschylus, ruler of Verona, rode into the square with his guards. His face was dark with anger. The guards forced the fighters apart, while the prince's voice cut through the uproar like a blade. "You men, you beasts! Will you spill the blood of Verona's streets forever?" he cried. "3 times the peace of our city has been broken by your foolish brawls. If you disturb our streets again, The price will be your lives." The crowd fell silent. The Montagues and Capulets lowered their swords, shame flickering in their eyes, but pride still burning in their hearts. Slowly, they stepped back, retreating to their corners of the city. In the midst of this chaos, a young man named Romeo Montague had not lifted a sword. He walked the quieter streets alone, lost in his thoughts. His friends spoke of the feud with fire and anger, but Romeo's heart was elsewhere. He was not thinking of swords, but of love, or rather, of love unreturned. Romeo wandered through the shaded gardens near his family's house, the sound of distant quarrels fading into the hum of cicadas and the rustle of leaves. His cousin Benvolio, always concerned for Romeo's restless spirit, found him leaning against an olive tree, eyes distant, as though gazing at something no one else could see. "Romeo," Benvolio said gently, "why do you hide yourself here while Verona burns with anger?" "Your father worries. The prince has threatened death if these fights continue, and yet you vanish like a shadow. What troubles you?" Romeo sighed, his voice low and full of longing. "Benvolio, it is not the feud that burdens me. It is love, or rather, the cruelty of love. I am lost in it, drowning, and the one I love does not even see me." Benvolio frowned. "Is this about Rosalind again?" At her name, Romeo's eyes softened with pain. "She is like a star I cannot reach, a flame I cannot touch. She has sworn to live without love, to walk the path of chastity. I might as well try to woo the moon or chase the wind." Benvolio, though young, had a practical mind. He placed a hand on Romeo's shoulder. "Then forget her. Look around you. Verona is full of beauty. There are other women, other hearts waiting to be discovered. Go where the music plays, where the dances are. You cannot heal by locking yourself away." Romeo shook his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Your advice is kind, but how can I forget someone who has carved her name into my soul? No, Benvolio. Until I see her again, I will live as if half my heart is missing." Benvolio sighed, knowing Romeo's stubbornness well. "Then let us at least go where the light is. Tonight, the Capulets host a great feast. There will be music, laughter, masks to hide who we are. Perhaps there you will find something, or someone, worth your gaze." Romeo hesitated. A Capulet feast meant danger. Their family name alone could spark trouble. But the idea of music and dancing, of a world larger than his sorrow, tempted him. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "perhaps I will go, but only to look, not to love." Inside the grand halls of the Capulet household, preparations for the evening's feast filled every corner with sound and motion. Servants hurried through wide doorways, carrying trays of fruits, fresh bread, and sweet wine. Musicians tuned their instruments in a corner, testing strings and flutes that would soon fill the air with laughter and melody. In a quiet chamber upstairs, Juliet Capulet sat by a window, her young face lit by the warm glow of the setting sun. She was just 14, on the edge between childhood dreams and the first touch of womanhood. Her nurse, a woman who had cared for her since infancy, fussed over her gown, smoothing the soft fabric with loving hands. "Ah, my sweet lamb," the nurse said with a chuckle. Tonight you will shine brighter than all the candles in this house. The young men will not know where to look when you enter the hall." Juliet smiled shyly, but shook her head. "I do not care for such things, nurse. Let them look where they will. A dance, a laugh. That is all I wish for." Her mother, Lady Capulet, entered the room, her steps brisk, her voice carrying both warmth and authority. "Juliet, my daughter, tonight you will be seen by many. Among them is Count Paris, a nobleman of wealth and standing. He has asked for your hand, and your father believes it is time you consider marriage." Juliet lowered her eyes. Marriage felt like a distant foreign land she was not ready to visit. "Madam," she said softly, "I will look upon him tonight. If looking is all that is required, I will try to like what I see." Lady Capulet smiled with approval. "That is all we ask, my child. Let your heart be gentle, and perhaps love will follow." The nurse, ever fond of teasing, added, "Paris is as fine as any man I have seen, and I've seen many in my years. Handsome, rich, and kind. If you cannot love him, Juliet, I'll marry him myself." Juliet laughed, a sound like bells on a clear morning. Yet as she gazed out the window at the fading sky, something stirred in her heart, something restless and unspoken. She did not know why, but tonight felt different, as though the air itself carried a secret she had yet to discover. Night fell over Verona like a velvet curtain, and the Capulet house blazed with light. Dozens of candles flickered in gilded holders, while bright tapestries lined the great hall. The music of lutes and violins drifted through the air, mixing with the hum of laughter and the soft murmur of conversations. Servants moved gracefully between the guests, balancing silver trays of roasted meats and sweet pastries. Among the crowd, masked figures danced, their identities hidden behind painted smiles. It was a night of elegance and disguise, a rare moment when even enemies might brush shoulders without knowing. Romeo, Benvolio, and their lively friend Mercutio approached the Capulet house dressed as masked revelers. Benvolio whispered a warning. "Remember, we are in enemy territory. Keep your temper if you see any Capulet faces." Mercutio grinned, his mask hiding the mischievous glint in his eyes. "Temper? I came for the music, the dancing, and perhaps a beautiful lady's hand. Romeo, you'll forget your Rosalind tonight. Mark my words." Romeo, though reluctant, stepped inside, his breath catching as he took in the scene. The hall shimmered with light and color, but all of it seemed to fade when he saw her. Across the room, Juliet moved like a dream. Her gown, pale as moonlight, glowed against the warm candlelight. She laughed softly with her nurse, unaware that someone had just seen her and forgotten how to breathe. Romeo's world stopped. Every sound, every voice, every flicker of movement vanished in that moment. He whispered to himself, "Did my heart ever love before this night? I swear, I never saw true beauty till this moment." Mercutio noticed his gaze and elbowed him with a grin. "Well, there's a cure for your sorrow, my friend. Go speak to her. Fortune favors the bold." Romeo, with his heart pounding, moved closer, weaving through the crowd like a man in a trance. He reached Juliet just as she turned, and for a heartbeat, They simply looked at each other. There was no feud, no name, no world beyond that gaze. Taking her hand gently, Romeo spoke, his voice trembling with awe. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, my gentle sin is this: my lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready to smooth that rough touch with a kiss. Juliet, startled yet drawn to him, answered softly, Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which shows devotion in this touch. Their words danced between them like music, a conversation half serious, half playful, but charged with a force neither had ever felt. As the music swelled, Romeo leaned closer, and Juliet's world seemed to tilt. But their moment was shattered when Tybalt, Juliet's fiery cousin, caught sight of Romeo's face beneath the mask. Rage burned in Tybalt's eyes. A Montague at a Capulet feast. This was an insult he could not ignore. Tybalt's hand went straight to his sword, but the weight of the moment froze him. He did not want to stain the Capulet feast with blood, not yet. Instead, he stalked toward Lord Capulet, his anger barely contained. "Uncle!" Tybalt hissed. "That man is a Montague!" "I would know his face anywhere. He dares to mock us by stepping under our roof." Lord Capulet, already in high spirits from the celebration, waved him off. "Calm yourself, Tybalt. This is no time for fighting. Young Romeo is known throughout Verona for his virtue and grace. Let him be. We shall not have brawls at my feast." Tybalt clenched his jaw, his knuckles white on the hilt of his sword. "But he is our enemy." "I said no," Capulet snapped, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We will not have our honor marred tonight. Forget him." Though silenced, Tybalt's eyes burned with fury. He turned away, muttering under his breath, "This intrusion will not go unpunished. I'll remember you, Romeo." Meanwhile, Romeo had not noticed the storm brewing nearby. He and Juliet still stood close, their hands trembling slightly as they lingered in that first intoxicating moment of discovery. Juliet's eyes shone, a mixture of curiosity and something far deeper, though she could not yet name it. The nurse approached, bustling with protective energy. "Juliet, your mother wishes to speak with you," she said, pulling the girl gently away. But as Juliet turned to leave, she glanced back at Romeo, her heart pounding like a drum. Romeo, still dazed, asked the nurse, "Who is that lady?" The nurse gave him a sharp look. "Why, that's Juliet, the daughter of Lord Capulet. You'd best keep your distance." The words hit Romeo like a blow. A Capulet, his family's sworn enemy. "A Capulet," he whispered to himself, pain and wonder mingling. "My life is in my enemy's hands, and yet I cannot let her go." Juliet, too, asked the nurse quietly as they walked away, "Who is that young man?" "His name is Romeo, and he's a Montague," the nurse replied. Juliet stopped in her tracks, her face paling slightly. "My only love sprung from my only hate," she murmured. "Too early seen unknown, and known too late." The Capulet feast was over, but Romeo's heart could not rest. He wandered away from his friends, slipping into the shadowed streets of Verona, until he found himself beneath the high walls of the Capulet house. The garden beyond was still and quiet, bathed in the pale silver of the moon. "Can I go forward when my heart is here?" Romeo whispered to himself. "Turn back, dull earth, and find thy center there." He climbed the wall, driven not by reason, but by a force stronger than fear, a force that made every breath, every heartbeat, pull him closer to Juliet. In the garden, the world seemed to sleep, but Romeo hid among the trees, searching for even the smallest glimpse of her. Then, as if heaven had answered his wish, a window above opened, and Juliet stepped into the moonlight. She leaned on the balcony, her face soft and luminous, as if the stars themselves had gathered in her eyes. Romeo froze. He dared not speak, but every part of him ached to call her name. Juliet, thinking herself alone, spoke into the night. "O Romeo, Romeo! Wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father, and refuse thy name. Or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet." Her words struck him like a lightning bolt. She loved him. She loved him enough to wish he were no Montague. His heart surged with joy, and though caution whispered to remain silent, love overpowered all fear. "Call me but love," Romeo whispered from the shadows, "and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth I never will be Romeo." Juliet started, her hand flying to her chest. "What man art thou that, hid in night, dost stumble upon my counsel?" "By a name I know not how to tell thee who I am," Romeo said, stepping into the pale light. "My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself because it is an enemy to thee. Had I it written, I would tear the word." Juliet's breath trembled. "Art thou not Romeo, and a Montague?" "Neither, fair maid, if either thee dislike." They stood gazing at one another, as if the whole world had narrowed to this single moment. Juliet, torn between fear and wonder, whispered, "If they see thee, they will murder thee." "I have night's cloak to hide me from their eyes," Romeo said, smiling softly. "And if thou love me, let them find me here. My life were better ended by their hate than death prorogued, wanting of thy love." Her heart, once cautious, melted with every word. "Dost thou love me? I know thou wilt say, 'Aye,' and I will take thy word. Yet if thou swear'st, thou mayst prove false. Gentle Romeo, if thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully." "I swear," Romeo said, "by yonder blessed moon I vow, that tips with silver all these fruit tree tops." "Swear not by the moon," Juliet interrupted softly. "The moon is inconstant. Swear by thyself, the god of my idolatry, if thou wilt swear." Romeo took a breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "If my heart's true love," a voice called from inside, Juliet's nurse, breaking the moment. Juliet looked back at him with urgency. "3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If thy love be honorable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow. If not, do not waste my tears." As she stepped inside, she whispered, "Good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow, that I shall say good night till it be morrow." Romeo stood beneath her window, his soul alight with a joy he had never known. "Sleep dwell upon thine eyes, peace in thy breast. Would I were sleep and peace, so sweet to rest. As dawn broke over Verona, painting the sky with soft gold and rose, Romeo's heart burned with only one thought: Juliet. Her words still rang in his mind. If thy love be honorable, thy purpose marriage. There was no time to waste. He would marry her, whatever the risk, and bind their souls together before the hatred of their families could tear them apart. Romeo hurried through the winding streets to the cell of Friar Lawrence, a wise and kind-hearted priest who had long been a friend to him. The friar was tending to his herbs and flowers when Romeo arrived, his robe brushed with dew. "Good morrow, Romeo," Friar Lawrence said, noticing the strange light in the young man's eyes. "You have not slept, I see. Trouble keeps you awake, or is it love?" Romeo smiled, breathless. "It is both, good friar. I love, and I am troubled, for my heart cannot rest until Juliet is my wife." The friar raised his brows. "Juliet? Capulet's daughter? What of Rosalind, the one who filled your thoughts but yesterday?" "Rosalind was a shadow," Romeo replied earnestly. "Juliet is the sun. With her I have found the truth of love. I beg you, join our hands in marriage today." Friar Lawrence paused, studying Romeo's face. He saw no trace of doubt there, only a fiery determination. Yet the old man's heart was heavy with caution. "My son, your love burns bright, but do you not see the danger? Your families are sworn enemies. This union could bring ruin, or, perhaps, peace." "Peace," Romeo said with sudden hope. "If our love can end the hatred between our houses, is that not a holy cause? Friar, I am ready to face any peril if I may call Juliet my bride." The friar, moved by Romeo's words, sighed and nodded. "Then come this afternoon, and I will wed you. May God turn your union into a blessing." Meanwhile, across the Capulet house, Juliet could not sit still. She paced her room, her heart racing as she thought of Romeo's promise. Her nurse, ever observant, teased her with knowing glances. "Why do you sigh so deeply, my child? Has some young man stolen your breath?" Juliet blushed, unable to speak his name, but when the nurse pressed, Juliet whispered, "I love him, and he loves me. I must see him again." The nurse chuckled, but her eyes softened. "Love is a daring fire, sweet Juliet. If you have chosen him, then I will carry your message." The afternoon sun was warm but gentle as the nurse set out on her mission. She moved quickly through the streets of Verona, her heart pounding with excitement and worry. She was the messenger between two worlds, Juliet's guarded chamber and Romeo's restless spirit. Finding Romeo near the market square, she approached with a conspiratorial smile. "Romeo, my lord, Juliet sends her love and begs to know when you can meet again. She wishes to be wed." Romeo's eyes lit up with joy. Tell my sweet Juliet, that this very day I will meet with Friar Lawrence. By evening, we shall be husband and wife." The nurse nodded and hurried back, weaving through the crowded streets like a shadow. Inside the cool, fragrant cell of Friar Lawrence, preparations were quietly underway. The friar set out simple white cloths and gathered holy oil, ready to bless a union that might heal a city torn by hate. Romeo arrived, his face alight with hope, and shortly after, Juliet slipped in, her cheeks flushed, but her eyes steady and brave. They clasped hands, their fingers trembling, hearts beating as one. Friar Lawrence began, his voice calm and solemn. "If you consent, speak now or forever hold your peace." Both answered with a clear and steady, "I do." The ceremony was brief, but filled with the weight of destiny. Two young souls joined not just by love, but by a hope greater than themselves. Outside the quiet cell, the world remained unaware of the vow exchanged in whispered promises and sacred words. Romeo and Juliet, now bound in secret, knew the road ahead was steep and dangerous. But in that moment, beneath the watchful eyes of the friar and the fading daylight, they had found a rare and precious light. The secret marriage between Romeo and Juliet was a fragile thread woven in shadows, but the world around them remained a place of anger and rivalry. The long-standing feud between the Montagues and Capulets cast a dark cloud over Verona, and even the smallest spark could ignite a deadly flame. Tybalt, still burning with hatred, searched for any chance to confront Romeo. He saw the marriage as a betrayal, a stain on the Capulet name that demanded revenge. His eyes flicked with fury whenever he heard Romeo's name whispered in the streets. One hot afternoon, fate pushed the two families to a deadly clash. On a bustling Verona street, servants of both houses exchanged harsh words. Words grew into shouts, and shouts into a frenzy of violence. Benvolio, Romeo's cousin, tried desperately to keep peace. "Put down your swords! We are all Verona's sons and daughters." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. Tybalt appeared, sword drawn, seeking Romeo. "Where is that villain Montague? He dares to show his face in our city," he snarled. Romeo, who had been trying to avoid conflict, stepped forward. "I do protest. I never injured thee, but love thee better than thou canst devise." Tybalt was unmoved. "Then prepare to die," he spat. Before swords clashed, Mercutio, Romeo's closest friend, intervened with a bold laugh. "Tybalt, you'll not make a fool of me today. Let's settle this quickly." The fight erupted. Mercutio and Tybalt dueled fiercely, their blades flashing under the sun. Romeo tried to stop them, but the chaos was unstoppable. Tragically, Mercutio was struck down. With his dying breath, he cursed both houses. "A plague of both your houses." Anger and grief overtook Romeo. No longer able to hold back, he faced Tybalt with fury, and in a swift and desperate act, struck him down. The streets fell silent. Tybalt lay lifeless. Romeo stood shaken, realizing the terrible cost of his actions. The air in Verona grew heavy with sorrow and anger as news of Tybalt's death spread like wildfire. The Prince of Verona, burdened with the duty to maintain order, summoned Romeo to answer for his crime. Romeo arrived at the prince's court, his heart weighed down by grief and fear. The faces of the lords and ladies were stern, their voices cold as they spoke of justice and law. Prince Aeschylus declared, "Romeo, thou art condemned to exile. Henceforth, never return to Verona, or thy life shall pay the forfeit." The words fell like thunder. Exile, banishment from the city he loved, from his family, and most painfully, from Juliet. Romeo's world shattered. He pleaded, "Is my love so boundless that I must be torn from my bride? Must I leave the only light in my darkness?" Friar Lawrence tried to comfort him. "Romeo, banishment is cruel, but it spares your life. Use this time wisely. Arrange your future with Juliet, and hope the hatred may one day fade." But the pain was too deep. Romeo fled to the nearby city of Mantua, a stranger in a foreign place, his soul restless and aching. Back in Verona, Juliet's despair was no less. The news of Romeo's exile reached her in tears. Her heart ached with longing and fear, yet her love remained unwavering. She confided in her nurse, "My heart is torn. To be apart from Romeo is a cruel fate, but my love for him is stronger than the walls that keep us apart." As the sun set on their fractured world, the lovers held on to hope, hope that fate might yet bend in their favor, that their secret bond could withstand the storms ahead. Days passed in a heavy silence for Juliet, but the walls around her world began to close in. Lord Capulet, unaware of his daughter's secret, believed a match with Paris, a noble and handsome gentleman, would secure her future and strengthen their family's position. One afternoon, Capulet summoned Juliet to his grand hall. "My daughter," he said with authority, "it is time you prepare for marriage to Paris. He is a worthy match, and I expect your agreement." Juliet's heart shattered silently. She thought of Romeo, her husband in secret, now far away and banned from Verona. How could she ever agree to marry another? I cannot," Juliet whispered, her voice trembling. "My heart belongs to another." Capulet's eyes narrowed. "You will obey. This is for your own good, and ours." Desperate, Juliet sought comfort in Friar Lawrence, who devised a risky plan to help her escape this fate. The tension between duty and desire grew unbearable. Juliet's world was now a maze of hidden meetings, whispered promises, and a looming future she wished to rewrite. Her only hope rested on the fragile hope that Friar Lawrence's plan would work, and that love could conquer even the darkest of obstacles. Friar Lawrence listened carefully as Juliet poured out her fears and hopes. The weight of the situation was clear. Her forced marriage to Paris would end her secret union with Romeo and shatter the fragile happiness they had found. The friar, wise and cautious, proposed a daring solution. "Take this potion, Juliet," he said, holding a small vial filled with a pale liquid. "It will make you appear dead for 42 hours. Your family will mourn you, believing you gone. Then, when you awaken in your family tomb, Romeo will be there to take you away." Juliet's eyes widened, but she nodded resolutely. "I will do anything to be with Romeo." The plan was set. Juliet would fake her death, buy time, and escape the cruel fate imposed on her. That night, alone in her chamber, Juliet drank the potion. A cold calm settled over her as she lay down to sleep, deep, unnatural sleep. Morning came, and the Capulet household was thrown into chaos. Finding Juliet seemingly lifeless, grief struck her family like a thunderbolt. The joyous wedding plans transformed into preparations for a funeral. Romeo, still in exile and unaware of the friar's message explaining the plan, heard only the devastating news. News of Juliet's death spread through Verona like a cold shadow. When Romeo heard the news, his heart shattered completely. He could not believe that fate had been so cruel to separate him from his beloved, even in death. Desperate and broken, Romeo resolved to return to Verona, to see Juliet one last time, even if it meant defying the prince's decree. He found his way to the Capulet family tomb, where the air was thick with sorrow and silence. Entering the cold crypt, he saw Juliet lying still, pale as marble, her beauty untouched even in death. Romeo's grief overwhelmed him. "Here's to my love," he cried, holding a vial of poison. "Thus, with a kiss, I die." He drank the poison swiftly, falling beside Juliet's motionless form. Moments later, Juliet stirred, awakening from her drugged sleep. She found Romeo lifeless, his eyes closed forever. Horror and despair consumed her. With trembling hands, she took his dagger and whispered, "O happy dagger, this is thy sheath. There rust, and let me die." She fell beside him, their lives ending intertwined. The tragedy shocked Verona to its core. The families, devastated by the loss of their children, finally realized the cruel cost of their hatred. The story of Romeo and Juliet, two young souls torn apart by an ancient feud, echoes through the ages as a haunting reminder of love's power and the tragedy of hate. Their secret marriage, their desperate hope, and their untimely deaths shook the foundations of Verona, forcing their families to confront the cost of their enmity. In the quiet aftermath, the Montagues and Capulets, bound by grief, agreed to end their long conflict. Statues were raised, and peace was forged from sorrow. Yet the legacy of Romeo and Juliet remains more than a tale of tragedy. It is a testament to the courage of love that dares to defy division, the innocence lost to pride, and the hope that even the deepest wounds can heal. Their story invites us to reflect on the choices we make, the walls we build, and the bridges we can build instead. Love, in its purest form, transcends names, families, and fate. Though their lives were brief, Romeo and Juliet's love shines eternal, a flame lighting the dark corridors of history and human hearts. Thank you so much for listening to our retelling of Romeo and Juliet. Which part of this timeless love story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends so they can experience this classic tale too.